Why is it that the very women you love with all your heart, the ones you do anything for, are sometimes the ones who hurt you the most? Have you ever sat alone at night, staring at the ceiling, asking yourself, how did we get here? How did my love become the weapon she uses against me? Let me tell you something you're not going to hear in polite conversation. There's a dark truth, a brutal psychological undercurrent that explains why some women lash out at the men who cherish them. And once you hear it, you'll never look at love or yourself the same way again. Why would someone you love deliberately hurt you? Think about that. Really think about it. How can the person you've trusted, the one you've opened your heart to, the one you've stood vulnerable before, how can they turn that vulnerability into a weapon? That's the dark question we're confronting here. Why do some women, when they realize they hold emotional power over a man, choose not to nurture, but to manipulate? And why, as men, do we allow it? There's a raw, unsettling truth here, one that most people are too afraid to face, but we're going to face it tonight. You see, love is not just affection, it's sacrifice, it's exposure. When a man truly loves a woman, he hands her a loaded weapon, the power to hurt him more deeply than anyone else in the world. Why? Because he gives her access to the most tender parts of his soul. And here's where the darkness creeps in. Some women, instead of protecting that gift, exploit it. They realize they can bend him, mold him, control him, not because he's weak, but because he's loyal, because he's committed, because he's in love. Have you ever felt that slow erosion of dignity, that creeping feeling that you're walking on eggshells, desperate not to upset her, terrified that one wrong word, one forgotten moment will lead to coldness or cruelty or withdrawal? Why does this happen? Why would someone who supposedly loves you test how much pain you can endure? Is it because they're evil? No, it's because power corrupts, especially unearned power. Let's get brutally honest. Some women fall into the temptation to exploit emotional leverage simply because they can. It's not always conscious, but it's real. She sees how devoted you are. She senses you'll stay even when you're miserable. She realizes that a single look, a single harsh word can wound you. And instead of restraining herself, she uses it. Why? Because human beings, when they feel insecure or out of control in other areas of life, often reach for the closest source of dominance. And tragically, that's often the man who loves them. And here's the part that should shake you. She does it because you allow it. I'm not here to blame men or excuse cruelty, but I am here to tell you this. You are complicit in your own suffering when you refuse to set boundaries, when you keep sacrificing yourself in the desperate hope that love alone will fix everything. Love is not enough if it comes without self-respect. Do you hear me? Love without boundaries is not love, it's servitude. Now, take a moment, pause, ask yourself, when was the last time you stood up, not in anger, not in aggression, but in clarity and strength, and I said, this is who I am. This is what I will not accept. Can you even remember? Or have you been so busy trying to please, to appease, to hold things together that you've lost the very core of who you are? Man, you must wake up. You must confront the brutal reality that if someone is exploiting your love, they will continue until you stop them. Not because they're a monster, but because that's human nature. And if you don't reclaim your spine, your dignity, your voice, you will be hollowed out until there's nothing left of you but resentment and exhaustion. So what do? You remember your worth. You remember that love is not permission for abuse. You remember that the more you shrink yourself to avoid conflict, the more conflict you create, because resentment builds where honesty should live. You remember that you are not a tool to be used, not an emotional punching bag, not a spineless shadow waiting for approval. You are a man, and you must act like it. Let me leave you with this and let it ring in your mind long after this moment. The world will treat you exactly as poorly as you allow it to. And the same is true in love. If you allow yourself to be bent and broken under the weight of someone's exploitation, you are not a martyr. You are a volunteer. So stand up, look in the mirror, decide who you are, and remember this: love given without self-respect is not love at all, it's surrender. And you were not made to surrender. You were made to stand. And you ever wondered why the person you love the most sometimes treats you like you're invisible? Why the one you give everything to starts acting like you're a burden? Here's a brutal truth. Familiarity breeds contempt. Sit with that. Let it hit you in the chest. Because this is the core of why so many men are blindsided when the woman they love begins to hurt them. Not out of hatred, but out of something far more corrosive: boredom, complacency, and taken for granted comfort. Let me be blunt. When you give and give and give without demand, when you become too available, too eager to please, too ready to sacrifice, you cease to be a challenge and you become a fixture, a background piece. A man who once inspired awe or admiration becomes the man she assumes will always be there, no matter what. And here's where the dark side creeps in. The more she assumes you'll never leave, the less she values you. This is not because women are cruel, it's because human nature warps under the weight of guaranteed attention. When was the last time you made her earn your respect? When was the last time you set a standard, a line in the sand, and said, I will not be treated this way? Do you even remember? Or have you quietly slipped into the pattern so many men fall into, tolerating the dismissive remarks, the cold distance, the subtle cuts, all because you're terrified of confrontation, terrified of losing her, terrified of standing alone? But listen to me. When you tolerate contempt, you invite it. You give it a seat at the table of your relationship. I'm not saying love should be a power game. I'm not saying you should constantly test or challenge each other, but I am saying this: respect dies when a man abandons his self-respect in the desperate attempt to maintain peace. You think you're preserving love by giving her everything. You think you're proving your devotion by being endlessly forgiving. But what you're actually doing is destroying the polarity that creates desire and admiration. You are making yourself invisible, and you are teaching her day by day to treat you like you don't matter. Let me ask you a hard question. Why are you so afraid to assert your worth? Why are you so terrified of saying, no, I will not tolerate this? Is it because you've tied your entire sense of identity to her approval? Is it because you believe that if she's unhappy, it's your fault, your failure, your flaw? Listen closely. That belief will ruin you. It will hollow you out until you are nothing but a shell of the man you were meant to be. There's a deep psychological truth here, one that most people never dare face. Love without tension, without the push and pull of mutual challenge, stagnates. It dies. And when a woman no longer feels challenged by you, when she no longer sees you as someone with a spine, with standards, with strength, she begins to test you. Not consciously, not maliciously, but deeply and instinctively. And if you fail those tests, if you roll over, if you apologize for things you didn't do wrong, if you chase when she withdraws, you train her to treat you with contempt. So what's the way out? It's not to become cruel. It's not to play games. It's not to withhold affection or punish her emotionally. No, it's to reclaim your backbone, to stand tall, to know your value, to communicate calmly but firmly what you will and will not accept. To remind both her and yourself that you are a man worthy of respect, not just love. Because here's the terrifying irony. The more you sacrifice your boundaries to keep her, the more you push her away. And the more you stand in your own strength, the more she is drawn to you, whether she admits it or not. Just let me leave you with this. Burn it into your mind. If you don't command respect, you will be swallowed by contempt. And contempt is the death knell of love. So stop begging for what should flow naturally. Stop apologizing for existing. Stop erasing yourself to fit into someone else's expectations. Be a man she can admire, not just use. Be a man who knows who he is, even if it means standing alone. Because if you don't stand now, you'll collapse later, and by then it will be far too late to rebuild. Why do you think she lashes out at you? Not when you fail, but when you succeed. Why is it that sometimes when a man starts to rise, when he dares to improve himself, the very woman he loves seems to pull him back, criticize him, diminish him? That's not something people like to talk about, is it? But it's real, and you know it. There's a dark and deeply human tendency for people, yes, even the ones closest to you, to resent your growth because it threatens the status quo. And that's what we're talking about here, resentment toward your improvement. Let me put it bluntly, when you decide to step up, to become stronger, more disciplined, more focused, you aren't just changing yourself, you're forcing everyone around you to confront their own inadequacies. And not everyone wants to face that mirror, especially in intimate relationships. When one person grows and the other resists, tension explodes. You're not just lifting yourself up, you're inadvertently exposing where they standing still. Have you ever felt that sting? You tell her you've started going to the gym and she rolls her eyes. You tell her you're working on a side project and she acts annoyed. You start setting boundaries and she calls you selfish or distant. Ask yourself, is she reacting to who you are or is she reacting to who you're becoming? And here's the real kicker. Sometimes it's both. Because deep down, your improvement signals something terrifying. The possibility that you might outgrow her. Now, I'm not saying every woman does this consciously, nor am I saying all women are like this. That would be foolish. But what I am saying, what you need to hear, is that some women, when confronted with a man who is no longer content to be mediocre, will push back. Not because they want to lose you, but because they're terrified of being left behind. Growth is threatening. Change is destabilizing. When you change, you force her to ask, am I changing too? Am I keeping up, or am I just holding him back? Let's step into the fire here. Are you willing to shrink yourself to make her comfortable? Are you willing to sabotage your future because you're afraid your strength will create friction? Because let me warn you, if you choose stagnation over growth, you're not preserving love. You're guaranteeing resentment from both sides. You will resent her for holding you back, and she will resent you for being the man who never fully became what he could have been. Why do you think so many relationships rot quietly from the inside? It's not just betrayal or neglect or lack of communication. It's the slow, suffocating erosion of respect. And nothing erodes respect faster than a man who abandons his potential for the sake of fragile peace. Hear me now. You were not put on this earth to dim your light so someone else doesn't feel blinded. You were not born to apologize for your ambition, your discipline, your hunger. If your improvement challenges the people around you, good. That's the point. That's how you know you're moving in the right direction. Because if everyone around you is endlessly comfortable with who you are, you're probably not growing at all. So here's what I want you to consider. Deeply, painfully, honestly. Are you slowing down because you fear she can't handle your speed? Are you sabotaging your own ascent because you're afraid she'll leave if you rise too high? If so, you are committing a slow spiritual suicide. You're killing off the best parts of yourself because you're terrified of losing her. But what kind of love demands your smallness? What kind of love thrives on your mediocrity? And let me leave you with this, and let it haunt you in the best possible way. If she cannot love the man you're becoming, then she was never meant to love the man you are. Do not betray your future to protect someone else's comfort. Do not chain yourself to stagnation out of fear. Rise anyway, grow anyway. And if she stays, she's worthy. And if she doesn't, then she was only ever in love with your limits, not your potential. Why is it that the very man who gives his heart fully is often the man who's taken for granted? Why is it that the more devoted, the more reliable, the more steady a man becomes, the less respect he often receives from the woman he loves? Let me tell you something hard to swallow. Stability can be punished. And here's the dark truth. You need to hear it. The dependable man becomes invisible. Think about it. The man who shows up every day, who sacrifices without fanfare, who holds the line when life falls apart, that man becomes the background noise of her life. And you know why? Because we are wired, painfully so, to notice novelty, to crave excitement, to be drawn to what's unpredictable. But stability is the father who always comes home, the husband who never wavers, the boyfriend who is always there. And over time, his presence fades into the scenery, not because it lacks value, but because it lacks drama. Let me ask you, have you ever seen a woman chase after the man who ignores her? Have you watched her light up when the unavailable, unpredictable man gives her a scrap of attention? And yet the steady, loving man beside her gets barely a glance. Why? Because unpredictability hijacks the nervous system. It creates tension, longing, and a cycle of reward and punishment that becomes addictive. And here's where it gets brutal. Many women, many people mistake emotional turbulence for passion. So where does that leave you, the steady man, the provider, the protector, the one who sacrifices, who shows up, who holds his promises? I'll tell you where it leaves you. At risk of being taken for granted, resented, or even discarded. Not because you failed, but because you succeeded at being stable. That's the paradox. You become the foundation so solid that she stops feeling the ground beneath her feet. She walks on you without noticing the weight. And here's the part you need to hear, the part that should light a fire in your chest. You cannot rely on someone else to validate your worth just because you are stable. You cannot expect that your quiet sacrifices will always be honored or even seen. That's not the world we live in. If you anchor your identity to her appreciation, you will drown the moment she stops noticing you. So what do? Do you become chaotic? Do you play games? Absolutely not. You hold your ground, but you do something even more terrifying. You stop making her validation your purpose. You build a life that commands respect, not just from her, but from yourself. You stop asking, why doesn't she see me? And start asking, why am I waiting to be seen? That's where the shift happens. Let me press this deeper, because this is where most men fail. They become resentful. They say, I've done everything right. I've given her everything. Why isn't she grateful? And that resentment poisons the relationship from the inside. But the truth is, you gave with strings attached. You wanted your sacrifices to be a ticket to her permanent appreciation. That was the silent contract you wrote in your head. But love doesn't work like that. Respect doesn't work like that. You must become a man who gives, because it is in his nature, not because he's hungry for applause. You must embody strength, discipline, and presence, not because you need her to notice, but because that is who you have chosen to become. That is how you break the chain of resentment. That is how you reclaim your power. And here's the part you need to remember, the part that could change everything. If she cannot see the value of a man who is strong, reliable, and quietly heroic, it is not your job to shrink or become something you are not. It is your job to keep standing tall, to keep walking your path, and to let the chips fall where they may. Let me leave you with this, and I want you to burn it into your mind. If your strength and stability bore her, you don't need to change who you are. You need to change who you're building with. Do not dim the light of your integrity just because someone else's eyes have grown tired of it. Hold the line. And let the ones who cannot appreciate that strength drift away because they were never strong enough to walk beside you. Why do you keep forgiving someone who keeps cutting you deeper every time you let them close? Why do you tell yourself, it's okay, they didn't mean it, when you're left staring at the wreckage of your soul? Let me hit you with the brutal truth. Some women hurt the men who love them because they need to feel power over someone. And if you're the man who keeps bending, breaking, and forgiving, well, you're the perfect target. Now, I know that stings. I know you want to believe love conquers all, that your patience and kindness will eventually awaken the best in her. But listen carefully. Some people, men or women, cannot stand love that doesn't come wrapped in chaos. They cannot sit in peace. They need control. They need dominance. And when they find a man who offers them unconditional love, they don't honor it, they exploit it. Let me ask you, have you ever noticed how the more you give, the more she takes? How the more you forgive, the more she tests you? There's a reason for that. Every time you erase her betrayal, you teach her that your boundaries don't matter. You teach her that you'll keep showing up no matter how many times she wounds you. And over time, something dark takes root. She stops respecting you. Why? Because power without limits corrupts. When you give someone unchecked power over your emotions, you invite them to play God with your heart. and here's where it gets savage, you are handing over the knife. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying every woman is out to manipulate or harm, but if you're in a situation where you're constantly being hurt, constantly being disrespected, and you keep staying, you need to face a hard question. Why are you so afraid to walk away? Maybe you think leaving makes you a failure. Maybe you believe your love can fix her. Maybe you fear being alone more than you fear being broken. But listen to me carefully. Love without boundaries is not noble. It's self-betrayal. It's you abandoning yourself under the illusion that you're being strong. Real strength isn't measured by how much pain you can absorb. It's measured by how much truth you're willing to face. Let me slow down here because I want this to land deep. Every time you accept betrayal, every time you tolerate emotional cruelty, every time you rationalize her disrespect, you are teaching yourself that you don't matter. You are rewriting your own story to say, I am less valuable than the person who keeps hurting me. And if you do that long enough, you won't even recognize the man in the mirror. So here's the challenge, and it's a fierce one. You have to become the man who walks away from the game. You have to become the man who says, no more. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of the deep, unwavering knowledge that your soul is worth protecting. You must look her in the eyes and say, I love you, but I will not let you turn me into a hollow version of myself. That takes immense courage. That's real strength. And do you know what's terrifying about that? It means you have to face your own fear of abandonment, your own fear of loss, your own fear that without her you are nothing. But hear me, those are lies. You were someone before her, you are someone now, and you will be someone after if necessary. Do not confuse your worth with her approval. Do not mistake your sacrifice for success. But let me leave you with this, and I want it to ring in your head. Every time you feel the urge to stay silent when you should speak, to forgive when you should walk, a man who loves without self-respect will always be devoured by the person he's trying to save. Stop setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. You deserve better. And the moment you believe that, not just in your head, but in your bones, you will walk away from what destroys you, and you will walk toward the man you were always meant to be.